You ever, spend hours fiddling with one of those combination locks as a kid, convinced you'd crack the code to the universe or something?
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Turns out the encryption protecting our digital lives. Way more complex than those little locks. But what happens when even that encryption isn't enough? That's what we're diving into today, the world of quantum computing and what it means for information security.
It's a fascinating challenge. See, the encryption we use right now, it basically hinges on math problems that would take a regular computer, like an unimaginable amount of time to solve.
So our current encryption is basically relying on the fact that computers just aren't fast enough to crack the code.
Yeah. We're talking about timelines that extend, way beyond human existence. But that's where quantum computing comes in. It has the potential to change that equation completely.
Okay, so quantum computing. Different how?
It's a completely different beast. Instead of bits, which are either a 0 or a 1, quantum computers use qubits. Imagine a coin that can be heads, tails, or both at the same time.
Both at the same time. Now my brain hurts.
That's the power of superposition. It's a fundamental concept in quantum mechanics, and it's what gives quantum computers their edge.
So it's not just about speed. It's about a completely different way of processing information.
You got it. And this difference is precisely what allows quantum computers to tackle those seemingly impossible math problems we talked about, including the ones that our current encryption methods are built on.
I'm sensing some ominous music playing in the background here. What kind of problems are we talking about?
Well, one well-known example is Shor's algorithm.
Shor's algorithm, right. I've heard that name thrown around. What is it?
It's a quantum algorithm that could potentially crack the encryption we use every day, things like RSA.
RSA, that's what the backbone of online security, isn't it?
Pretty much. It's used everywhere. Online transactions, secure communications, you name it.
Okay, so bad news if this Shor's algorithm can crack RSA.
Right. Because it provides a shortcut, essentially, for
Right.
factoring large numbers. And that's the foundation of RSA encryption.
So all our data could become vulnerable, just like that.
Well, hold on. It's not an immediate threat. The quantum computers we have now, not powerful enough to pose a real risk to RSA or other common encryption methods yet.
Yet, being the operative word there. So we have time to figure something out.
We have a window, yes. And that's why there's a huge push right now to develop something called quantum-resistant security solutions. We need to be ready for the day when quantum computers are sophisticated enough to break our current codes.
So we're talking about a kind of digital arms race here.
In a way, yes.
Trying to stay one step ahead of those quantum code breakers.
Exactly.
But how do you even begin to build a defense against something that powerful?
Well, there are a few different approaches being explored, each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, walk me through it. What are some of the leading contenders in this quantum security showdown?
One of the most interesting ones is called quantum key distribution.
Quantum key distribution.
Yeah, QKD for short.
Okay, catchy name. How does that work?
Instead of trying to create a code that's too complex to crack, QKD actually changes the rules of the game.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How so?
Imagine you're trying to have a secret conversation, right? But if anyone tries to eavesdrop, the words just scramble into gibberish.
The information itself changes.
Exactly.
That's wild.
That's the basic idea behind QKD.
Okay, but how is that even possible?
It leverages this really cool quirk of quantum mechanics, this idea that the very act of observing a quantum system actually changes its state.
Hold on, so just by looking at something, you change it.
On a quantum level, yeah. So in QKD, if someone tries to intercept the encryption key, that act of observation introduces anomalies. And those anomalies basically act like a red flag, alerting the people who are supposed to be receiving the key.
It's like a self-destructing message. But instead of disappearing, the information just becomes unusable.
That's a great way to put it. And this inherent security feature makes QKD incredibly appealing for really high stakes applications, things like government communications, financial transactions, securing really critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I can see that. Anything where even a tiny risk of compromise is a major, major problem.
Mm-hmm.
But is QKD something that's actually feasible on a larger scale? Or is it still mostly theoretical?
It's already being used. A bunch of companies are actively developing Cambrano QKD systems, but of course, there are still some technical challenges that need to be worked out.
Like what?
One of the biggest hurdles right now is distance.
Distance? What do you mean?
QKD signals, they're light-based, right? So they're subject to this thing called degradation over long distances. They can become weaker and less reliable the farther they travel.
So we can send these ultra-secure messages, but only if we don't mind them potentially getting garbled in transit.
Not quite garbled, but the signal strength can definitely become an issue. But researchers are working on it. Things like quantum repeaters, which would basically act like relay stations to boost the signal along the way.
Okay, so that's QKD. What about other approaches? What else is on the table for this quantum-resistant future?
Well, aside from securing the communication channels themselves, there's a whole other area of research focused on developing new encryption algorithms that are inherently resistant to quantum attacks.
So instead of just protecting the message, we're making the code itself unbreakable?
Exactly.
But how do you even begin to do that?
Well, the idea is to base them on math problems that, even with the help of a quantum computer, would still take an insane amount of time to solve.
Okay, so kind of like finding the quantum equivalent of an unsolvable puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. And there are actually a bunch of different approaches being researched right now, each with their own pros and cons.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, one that's showing a lot of promise is something called lattice-based cryptography.
Lattice-based. What now?
So it uses these complicated geometric structures called lattices to create problems that are just incredibly hard to solve, even for a quantum computer.
Okay, so that's one. Any other contenders in this quantum cryptography showdown?
Another interesting one is hash-based cryptography, which utilizes cryptographic hash functions.
Hash functions, right. And those are designed to be
one-way functions. They're easy to compute in one direction, but almost impossible to reverse, which makes them really useful for this kind of thing.
Got it. So lots of different approaches, all with the same goal, protecting our data in a post-quantum world. But this is getting pretty deep into the technical weeds, and I got to imagine some of our listeners are thinking, okay, but what does this actually mean for me? What can the average person do to prepare for this quantum future besides, maybe brushing up on their linear algebra?
Well, first off, staying informed is huge. This field is constantly evolving, new breakthroughs happening all the time, so staying up to date on the latest research and recommendations is key.
Any specific resources you recommend for that?
One of the big ones is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. They're kind of leading the charge in developing these post-quantum cryptography standards.
So NIST, good place to start for anyone wanting to dive a little deeper.
Absolutely. Another thing you can do is, well, don't be afraid to ask questions. Talk to your tech providers, banks, email services, anyone who handles your sensitive information, and find out what they're doing to prepare for this.
So it's about being proactive, putting a little pressure on these companies to prioritize our security, even if those threats still feel a little way off.
Exactly. The more we demand these quantum-resistant solutions, the faster they'll become the norm. And finally, while it might seem less direct, supporting research and education in this whole quantum information science field is huge. We need more bright minds tackling these problems if we want to stay ahead of the curve.
It's like investing in our future digital security, really. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. From the basics of quantum computing to the potential risks it poses, and most importantly, the ways we're learning to fight back. It's definitely a mind-bending topic, but I think it speaks to just how quickly technology is evolving.
Absolutely, and how important it is to stay curious, stay informed, and to never stop adapting. The future is coming, whether we're ready or not, and I think this whole quantum revolution is a perfect example of that.
Well said. And on that note, I'm going to leave our listeners with one final thought. If we can harness something as complex and powerful as quantum mechanics to create unbreakable codes to protect our digital lives, what other possibilities are out there? What other secrets of the universe might we be able to unlock with this technology? It's a question worth pondering as we venture further into this exciting and maybe slightly daunting quantum future.